Welcome back. If you watch this program, you know we cover a lot of corruption, especially all the cases coming out of Albany. Now, you also know that we're not exactly doing cartwheels over how Governor Cuomo has necessarily handled ethics. And God knows, when he first came into office, he took the optics of standing next to the Tweed Courthouse here, promising, in fact, to root out corruption and crack down on it. Then, 2013, he formed the Anti-Corruption Moreland Commission, encouraging, but less than a year later, he disbanded that commission altogether. Since then, we've seen a slew of corruption convictions. Two of the so-called three men in the room, Shelley Silver and Dean Skelos, both found guilty. So was former top Cuomo aide Joe Percoco, and the Buffalo Billion trial also ended in convictions across the board. Now, that one had bid rigging in one of the governor's signature economic development projects. So, right after Percoco and the Buffalo Billion crew were indicted, Cuomo said he doesn't know how he could have stopped corruption. To that, a piece in the Journal News not only appeared, but offered some suggestions, unsolicited albeit, for the governor. Ramp up oversight powers sought by the state controller that would keep better tabs on the billions spent on economic development. Also, pass the Senate's database of deals legislation that would daylight information on who is being paid to do what for the state, and get back to Albany to get them to get the job done when it comes to ethics. Well, engagement editor Gary Stern, he co-wrote the piece. He's joined by former Democratic New York State Assemblyman and NYU professor Richard Brodsky, and I want to prepare you in advance. Richard actually agrees with someone on this. Okay, so I had the state controller sitting in that same chair just a few days ago, Gary, and he said, you know, it's high time, and he put a nice sheen on it, which he said, in an effort to expedite these projects, we have eliminated some of the processes to make sure that there was above board bidding and that it was in the best interest of the state. Regardless of the motivations for getting rid of it in the past, what's the consequence of fast-tracking it like we saw in Buffalo?
Well, I mean, you got to wonder after the Buffalo Billion convictions and the Percoco conviction, you know, can't there be somewhat more transparency? There has to be something. Right now, with these giant development projects coming out of the executive branch, we don't know anything. The public has very little access to information. How can it hurt to have the comptroller review these numbers, or to have the contracts in some kind of public database where people can look up to see who's getting the money, when they got it, and how the decisions were made? I mean, right now, we have no idea what's going on. We have no idea what's going on.
Why did it stop, Richard?
It stopped, well, I have to talk about my favorite subject a little bit.
Yes.
Me.
Richard and the universe. Yes,
I authored a bill called the Public Authorities Reform Act. It set up exactly those processes. There's a site on the Authority Budget Office site called the Parasite that tells you every contract, who gets it, what the costs were, who's employed, what debt they have. When what the governor did when we cut off the authority system as a source of these kinds of activities, he started creating not-for-profit corporations. So Fort Schuyler, which no one had ever heard of until this, was a not-for-profit corporation controlled by the governor, but not subject to the rules that apply to regular bidding and transparency. Everybody's complicit in that. The governor mostly, but the legislature as well. If you,
but why do they go along with that? That's a part I never understood. The hardest thing is to get something on the books. You actually had it on the books.
Because he put it in the budget. And if we go back to this famous discussion of whether the legislature can amend or change law,
please, let's not go down that road.
I didn't think you wanted to. The point of it was, whatever the reason was, it was a terrible mistake, and these were the consequences of it. Checks and balances are the essence of the American system, but the system now needs its checks and balances. And instead of moaning about general state of ethics, what you did was smart, focused, and I think completely appropriate.
And you get the blessing of Richard. I mean, what more can you want?
Doesn't happen often.
Let's get to your second point here, what we can do.
I mean, it would be nice, I think, if the governor showed some interest in what's going on in terms of corruption and ethics. He can't do anything. He doesn't know anything. He's completely unaware. These guys who are close advisors to him are being convicted, and he just doesn't even
Can I
want to
tell
talk
you the
about
part
it.
that I
He doesn't want
never-
to talk about it.
If you told me, Gary, a year and a half ago, 2 years, whenever we want to start before the cavalcade here of these corruption trials, our poor Dominic Carter lives basically down in Lower Manhattan at the courthouse, going from one end of the floor to the other, okay? That his third brother, in so many words, Joe Percoco, convicted across the board. His signature project in Buffalo, everybody is going away doing time. And the other two men in the room with him all go away. And he shuttered the Moreland Commission, but he's coming out of this, I'm sorry, he's coming out of this smelling fine. They never laid a glove on him. You may disagree. My perspective is his name barely came up at these trials. To a certain degree, in the Mangano case, it came up, but okay, unless you follow the inside baseball of it. Why is he incentivized to get his hands straight? When he shuttered the Moreland Commission, I said, he's dead man walking. There's no way you get around this, but I was wrong.
I mean, the reality is he has no incentive because the public doesn't get these cases. They're complicated.
It's August.
Sure.
He's got 3 opponents, Cynthia Nixon, Marcus Molinaro, and Stephanie Miner, who are going to make this an issue that he has to talk about.
Okay. You want no. You want to bet me?
Yes.
I'll give heads up.
Cash?
You think? Yeah.
You'll hold the money?
No. Here's the deal. You think he doesn't win by double digits?
No. That's a different,
Yeah, okay.
That's a different style. The voters of the state have never shown a particularly deep interest in what they view as systematic or occasional corruption. And they re-elect people short of being convicted. So voters don't share your view. That being said, what Gary was talking about was why he doesn't talk about it, why he's not held accountable. He's going to be. And by the way, you also said he doesn't pay attention to it. He is consumed by it. He doesn't pay attention to it publicly. He's going to be forced to do that in this election. And people like you, when you get debates and interviews, will help that pass. Don't worry. This will be discussed.
Okay, but Gary, and I know he is going to get mad, and I don't care on this one, but to me, what Shelley Silver at least exposed for me was, we all know the history, or maybe the audience doesn't, but the state legislature was not intended to be a full-time job, but it is. So I'll give credit that the legislators, beyond the 3 to 4 days a week they're in Albany, are doing certainly work in their districts when they get back. The idea that he's going to hang out a shingle and somebody's going to come to him for his legal counsel and any casework is ridiculous. They're coming to him for access and access alone. So as long as we have a system, and I'm going to further pivot to, and you know this very well, the disappearance of the newspapers that serve as watchdogs to keep a close eye. Why do we think we're not just going to change the names and rearrange the deck chairs, that people are going to use the access of their office to try and feather their nest? Don't we have to acknowledge that unless the legislature, we pay them like they're full-time employees, but they can't have outside income, right? We're going to be doing this same thing over and over again, even if the governor cares.
I think you're probably right. I mean, listen.
He's not.
Don't let him interrupt.
If we mention the new bridge, just the name of the bridge, people go bananas, right? Because they understand that the new bridge has a name that they don't like. Nobody understands what Shelley Silver did. Nobody understands the Buffalo Billions case. In order to have just a basic understanding, you have to spend some time reading it.
True.
To connect the dots between all these things.
That's a good thing.
Well, yes, it is. I wish people would do it, but there's just no
appetite.
There's no public momentum to address these issues, in my opinion, because they're too complicated. I mean, the good government groups will talk about this all day, but we can't get. I mean, people know that Albany's corrupt, but
Albany is not corrupt. There are corrupt people in Albany.
Yes, of
and
course.
you know, in that distinction is why voters turn off. The notion that we're living under a corrupt system is not true. And if it is true, it's true because the corruption is legal. The real scandal here is not these contracts, as bad as they are. It's campaign contributions.
Sure.
And yet.
Well, to me, it's something different than that. To me, you know, that famous line, pornography, I know it when I see it, okay? Abuse of power, I know it when I see it. No taxpayer or voter ever intended that Shelley Silver, and I can't believe I'm relitigating this, was able to take tax dollars, set up basically a fund that he would be the beneficiary of because business would be funneled back to him. Nobody ever thought, the taxpayer, that is what we elect lawmakers to do.
Putting aside the details, which I could argue with, you're right. And what Shelley Silver did was a betrayal of the public trust, a betrayal of private trust, awful, unethical, and even criminal.
Can we legislate that behavior out?
No, you don't have enough laws. You can prosecute, and frankly, any public official in New York who messes around now is not complete insanity as a defense, because finally the prosecutorial community is paying sufficient attention to this.
What about closing the LLC loophole?
It's a great idea. Public financing, it's a great idea. But remember, we're distinguishing, at least in this conversation, between criminal behaviors and unethical behaviors that are legal. And the campaign finance system has more impact on the things that matter to voters than fixing a contract.
Barrister?
That's a compliment,
yes, it is, at least at this table. So, do you believe post-Silver, post-Skelos, post-Buffalo Billions, post-Percoco, there's clarity now?
Yes. And
you really do?
I'm not sure I know what clarity means, but there's fear. And it's a justifiable fear, and it's a good fear. There's now a fear of being caught when there really wasn't. I'm not a big fan of Preet Bharara's, but that's what he did in his own inept way. And it's a healthy thing.
I always think there's Pedro Espadas out there who, if it's not nailed down, they're going to try and get their hands on. I don't think they're the plurality. I do think in every legislature you're going to find those
And not just the legislature, obviously in the executive branch
Fair
as well.
enough.
And by the way, the big leakage, the big economic leakage comes from the executive branch. It doesn't come from the legislature. That being said, we're in a different environment. The notion that if we only changed the laws, things would be better is not true. Your column was a good one. And that, I'm now a journalist in a lot of ways, but it's not easy for me to say these things. But congratulations!
You just admitted that you're part of the evil fourth estate. Okay, fake news. Gary, next time please disagree with him more. That's all I ask of you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Coming up next, baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and corruption. The story of the Rockland Boulders and how that minor league baseball team with that terrific stadium, well, they've gotten caught up in major league problems that the team didn't cause.